I remember the first time I saw her. It was a warm September afternoon in 2010, and the sun glinted off the glass facade of the office building where I worked. Emily walked in with a confidence that lit up the room, her dark auburn hair catching the light. She was a new hire in the marketing department, and from the moment we met, I was captivated. We began talking over coffee breaks, her laughter filling the air like music. By 2011, we were married, and life seemed perfect. We had our first son, Ethan, in 2012, and 3 years later, Caleb came into the world. Those years were a whirlwind of late-night feedings, first steps, and shared dreams of a happy future. But somewhere along the way, our story shifted. By 2017, the cracks in our marriage started to show. Emily's focus had shifted entirely to the boys. I admired her dedication as a mother, but I felt like a shadow in my own home. Our conversations became transactional: what groceries we needed, whose turn it was to take Ethan to soccer practice. I missed her, missed us. "Emily," I said one evening as we sat at the dinner table, "do you think we could go out this weekend? Just the two of us." She didn't even look up from cutting Caleb's food. "I don't know, Nick. The boys have their swim lessons, and I have a lot to catch up on at work. Maybe we could ask your mom to watch them," I suggested. She sighed, her tone clipped. "Nick, the kids are my priority right now. You need to understand that." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And what about me? Don't I matter to you anymore?" Her eyes flashed with irritation. "This again? Why do you always make it about you? Can't you see how much I'm juggling?" The room fell silent except for the clink of silverware against plates. Ethan and Caleb looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. I forced a smile, pushing down the ache in my chest. As the years went by, the distance between us grew. I tried everything: planning date nights, arranging surprise getaways, even involving her friends to encourage her to take a break. But nothing worked. Instead, she began to resent me, complaining to anyone who would listen that I wasn't pulling my weight. It wasn't true. I played with the boys, took them to the park, cooked dinner, cleaned the house, anything to give her some relief. But it was never enough. One evening, as I sat alone in our bedroom, I realized how isolated I'd become. My thoughts spiraled back to my childhood, memories I'd tried so hard to bury. My father's harsh words, the sting of his hand against my cheek. I'd vowed never to let my past define me, but the echoes of those traumas were louder than ever. Unable to voice my pain, I withdrew further, retreating into a world of hobbies that Emily dismissed as frivolous. "You're always in your head, Nick," she snapped one day. "Why can't you just be present?" "I'm trying, Emily," I replied softly. "But it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough for you." She crossed her arms, her expression cold. "Maybe because you're not trying hard enough." Her words cut deeper than she could have known. The harder I tried to bridge the gap between us, the more it seemed to widen. I suggested couples therapy, but she dismissed the idea, saying we didn't need a stranger to tell us how to fix our problems. Then came the house. She wanted to buy a property with her sister, Clara, despite my reservations. I argued that it was too risky, that we needed stability, but she wouldn't hear it. "This is important to me, Nick," she said, her tone resolute. "Why can't you just support me for once?" Reluctantly, I agreed, but her plans unraveled when Clara decided to sell the house and move on. I thought the ordeal might bring us closer, but instead, it only deepened the rift between us. In 2023, everything came crashing down. Emily began going out more frequently, leaving me with the boys night after night. "I need space," she said when I confronted her about it. "Time to clear my head." "But what about us?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "What about the boys? They ask for you every time you're gone." Her expression hardened. "They'll be fine, Nick. I'm still here, aren't I?" The late nights turned into a pattern. I tried to convince myself that nothing was going on, that I was just being paranoid. But the gnawing suspicion wouldn't leave me. One night, as we lay in bed, I reached out to her. Emily, I need to know if there's someone else. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with anger. I can't believe you'd even ask me that. Do you think so little of me? I wanted to believe her, to trust the woman I'd built my life with. But the nagging doubts wouldn't let me rest. When I finally discovered the truth, that she was seeing a colleague from work, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Confronting her was like tearing open an old wound. You betrayed me, Emily, I shouted, my voice trembling with rage and pain. After everything we've been through, how could you? She stood there, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake, Nick, but I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me? I repeated bitterly. You've shattered our family, and you think saying sorry will fix it? For a brief moment, I thought we could salvage what was left of our marriage. But as the weeks passed, her behavior reverted to the same patterns, cold, distant, and dismissive. The final blow came when I caught her meeting the same man again. Her excuses only fueled my anger. Why, Emily? I demanded. Why do you keep doing this to us? She looked at me, her voice devoid of emotion. Because I need to figure out who I am. And I can't do that with you watching my every move. Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of how far we'd fallen. As I sat alone that night watching the boys sleep, I made a silent vow. No matter what the future held, I would be there for Ethan and Caleb. They deserved love, stability, and a father who wouldn't let them down. And as much as it hurt to admit, I knew I couldn't keep chasing a love that was no longer mine. The week after catching Emily with him again was a blur of anger, sorrow, and sleepless nights. I tried to focus on the boys, Ethan, now 11, and Caleb, 8, but even they could sense something was wrong. Dad? Ethan asked one evening as I was helping him with his math homework. Is Mom mad at you? You guys don't talk much anymore. I paused, the pencil in my hand hovering over his workbook. No, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. Sometimes grown-ups just have things to figure out. Ethan's brows furrowed. But you're not happy. I can tell. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. It's not your job to worry about that, I said gently, ruffling his hair. You just focus on being a kid. Okay? But how could I ask him to do that when my own world was crumbling? Emily and I barely spoke unless it was about logistics, who was picking up the boys, what bills needed paying, the mundane details of a life that felt more like a business partnership than a marriage. One evening, after the boys were asleep, I decided we needed to talk. Really talk. Emily, I said, walking into the living room where she was scrolling through her phone. We need to figure this out. I can't live like this anymore. She didn't look up. What's there to figure out, Nick? You're the one who can't let things go. My jaw tightened. Let things go? You cheated on me, Emily. Twice. And I gave you a chance, but you're still seeing him. How am I supposed to just let that go? She sighed, setting her phone down. I told you it's not like that. He's just a friend. A friend. I snapped, my voice rising. Do you meet all your friends in secret? Do you lie to your husband about where you're going because you don't want to hurt him? How stupid do you think I am? Her eyes narrowed. I'm not doing this with you again, Nick. You're obsessed. You're tracking me like some kind of stalker. Because you've given me every reason not to trust you. I interrupted, my voice breaking. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? To the boys. She crossed her arms, her tone icy. Don't bring the kids into this. They're already in it, Emily. I yelled. Ethan knows something's wrong. Caleb's been asking why you're never around. They're not stupid, and neither am I. For a moment, she looked like she might say something. Maybe even apologize. But then her expression hardened. You know what? I'm done trying to explain myself to you. You're never going to believe me anyway. She grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs, leaving me standing alone in the living room. My hands trembled as I sank onto the couch, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a physical force. The next morning, I resolved to put my energy where it mattered most. My boys. Emily's choices were beyond my control, but I could still be the father they needed. I made pancakes for breakfast, adding extra chocolate chips to make Ethan smile. He did, but his eyes lingered on the empty chair where Emily usually sat. "Is Mom still asleep?" Caleb asked, his voice small. "Yeah, bud," I said. "She had a late night." "Was she with that guy again?" Ethan asked bluntly. My heart stopped. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged, pushing his pancake around his plate. "I heard you yelling last night. You said she was lying about where she goes." I closed my eyes, a wave of guilt washing over me. "Ethan, I'm sorry you heard that. Your mom and we're going through some tough stuff right now. But no matter what happens, we both love you and Caleb more than anything. You know that, right?" He nodded, but his expression was solemn. "I just want things to go back to the way they used to be." So did I. Later that day, I decided to confront Emily again, this time without the anger. I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling on her phone. "Can we talk?" I asked. She glanced up, her eyes wary. "What now, Nick?" "Please," I said, sitting across from her. "I just want to understand. What happened to us, Emily? How did we get here?" She set her cup down and sighed. "I don't know, Nick. Life happened. Kids, work, everything. It's like we forgot how to be us." "I didn't forget," I said quietly. "I've been trying, Emily, for years. But every time I reach out, you push me away." Her eyes softened, but there was still a distance in them. "I didn't mean to push you away. I don't know who I am anymore. Somewhere along the way I lost myself. And I guess I started looking for it elsewhere." "Is that what he is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "A way to find yourself?" She looked away, her silence confirming what I already knew. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling, "I love you. I always have. But I can't keep fighting for us if you're not willing to fight too." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't reach for me. "I don't know if I can, Nick. I don't know if I have anything left." I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. "Then maybe it's time we stop pretending." For the first time, the reality of our situation hit me. Our marriage, the life we'd built together, was slipping through my fingers. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't hold on to someone who didn't want to stay. The days following our conversation passed in a haze. We fell into an uneasy rhythm of coexistence, speaking only when necessary, our interactions stripped of the warmth and affection they once held. The boys could sense the tension, and it broke my heart to see their bright smiles dimmed by worry. One evening, after tucking Ethan and Caleb into bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the photo of us on our wedding day. Emily looked radiant, her smile full of hope and promise. I barely recognized the woman she had become, or the man I had turned into, for that matter. The silence was interrupted by Emily coming downstairs, her steps hesitant. She stopped at the doorway, her arms crossed. "Can we talk?" I looked up, surprised. "Sure." She sat on the edge of the couch, putting as much distance as possible between us. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about not pretending anymore." "And?" I asked, my voice cautious. She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the coffee table. "I don't know if I can give you what you need, Nick. I feel like I'm failing you, the boys, even myself. I keep trying to figure out how to fix this, but I just feel stuck." "Stuck how?" I asked, leaning forward. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I keep telling myself that things will get better, that I'll feel something again, but I don't, and I don't know if I ever will." Her words were a dagger to my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Emily, I've been trying to make this work because I believe in us. I believe in the family we've built. But I can't do it alone." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might reach out to me. Instead, she wiped them away quickly and stood up. "I need some air." Before I could respond, she was out the door, leaving me alone with the echo of her words. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep putting off a conversation with the boys. They deserved to know what was going on, even if I didn't have all the answers. After breakfast, I called them into the living room. "Hey guys," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk for a minute?" Ethan and Caleb exchanged worried glances before sitting down on the couch. "Is this about you and Mom?" Ethan asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it is. I know you've noticed that things haven't been great between us lately, and I want you to know that none of this is your fault." Caleb's lip quivered. "Are you getting a divorce?" The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. "I don't know," I admitted. "Right now, your mom and I are trying to figure out what's best for all of us. But no matter what happens, we both love you more than anything in the world. That will never change." "But why can't you just fix it?" Ethan asked, his voice pleading. "You're always telling us to work things out when we fight." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It's not that simple, buddy. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that aren't easy to solve. But I promise we're doing our best." Caleb climbed into my lap, wrapping his arms around me. "I don't want you to go," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, holding him close. "I'm here for you. Always." Ethan nodded slowly, though the worry in his eyes remained. "Okay," he said, "but promise you'll try." "I promise," I said, though the words felt hollow. That afternoon, Emily returned home, her face pale and drawn. She didn't say where she had been, and I didn't ask. Instead, I handed her a cup of coffee and motioned for her to sit down. "We need to talk about the boys," I said. Her eyes flickered with guilt. "What about them?" "They're scared, Emily. They know something's wrong, and it's not fair to keep them in the dark." She looked away, her fingers curling around the mug. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. "That we're trying to figure things out, but that we love them no matter what." She nodded, her shoulders sagging. "I don't want to hurt them, Nick." "Then we need to make a decision," I said gently. "Are we going to fight for this, or are we going to let it go?" Her hands trembled as she set the mug down. "I don't know," she whispered. "I wish I had an answer, but I don't." "Emily, I can't keep living in limbo," I said, my voice breaking. "I need to know if there's any part of you that still wants this. If there's even a chance, I'll fight for it. But if you're done, if you've already made up your mind, then I need to know." Tears streamed down her face, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the woman I fell in love with. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly, "but I don't know if I can find my way back." Her honesty was both a comfort and a dagger. "Then maybe we need some space," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Time to figure out what we really want." She nodded slowly, her expression pained. "Maybe you're right." As she left the room, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. For the first time, we had acknowledged the depth of our problems. Whether that would lead to healing or a final goodbye, I didn't know. All I knew was that the road ahead would be long, and I would have to take it one step at a time. The next few weeks were an exercise in endurance. Emily and I agreed to take some space from each other, even while living under the same roof. We moved into separate bedrooms, a silent acknowledgement of how far apart we'd grown. Nights were the hardest, lying alone in the dark, haunted by memories of what we used to be. I threw myself into being a father. Ethan and Caleb became my anchor, their laughter and innocence a reminder of what truly mattered. I took them to soccer games, helped them with their homework, and organized movie nights where we piled onto the couch with bowls of popcorn. One evening, as we were watching a superhero movie, Ethan leaned over and whispered, "Dad, are you and Mom going to get a divorce?" The question hit me like a freight train. I paused the movie and turned to him. "Why do you ask that, buddy?" He shrugged, his expression guarded. "I heard you guys talking the other day. You said you needed space." I sighed, ruffling his hair. "Your mom and I are trying to figure out what's best for our family. Sometimes grown-ups need time to think things through." "Does that mean you're leaving?" Caleb chimed in, his wide eyes brimming with worry. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. You and Ethan are the most important people in my life, and I'll always be here for you. That's a promise." Ethan nodded, though his lips pressed into a thin line. "I just want everyone to be happy again." "Me too, bud," I said, pulling him and Caleb into a hug. "Me too." As the weeks stretched on, Emily's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Some days, she would be warm and engaging, joining us for dinner and laughing with the boys. Other days, she was distant, retreating to her room or disappearing for hours without explanation. I tried not to press her, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. One Friday evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, she walked into the kitchen. "Nick," she said hesitantly, "I think I need to get away for a few days." I set down the dish I was washing and turned to face her. "What do you mean, get away?" "I need some time to think," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Just a weekend. I'll stay with Clara." My gut twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Does this have anything to do with him?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "No, this is about me, Nick. I need space to figure things out." I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bitter retort that rose to my lips. "Fine," I said evenly. "But while you're figuring things out, remember that we're still here. Ethan and Caleb still need their mom." Her expression softened, and for a moment, I thought she might change her mind. But she simply nodded and left the room. That weekend was one of the longest of my life. I kept busy with the boys, taking them to the park and out for ice cream, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the fear that Emily was slipping further away, that no amount of love or effort could bring her back. On Sunday evening, she returned home, her expression unreadable. She hugged the boys and asked about their weekend, but her eyes avoided mine. After they went to bed, I cornered her in the kitchen. "How was your time away?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It was helpful," she said, fiddling with the hem of her sweater. "And," I prompted. She sighed, finally meeting my gaze. "Nick, I think we need to have a serious conversation about where this is going." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she hesitated, her voice trembling, "I don't think I can give you what you need. I've tried, but I feel like I've already failed you, and I don't want to keep hurting you. So that's it." I asked, my voice rising. "You're just giving up? After everything we've been through?" "I'm not giving up," she said, her own voice tinged with frustration. "I'm trying to be honest. Isn't that what you wanted?" "What I wanted," I said bitterly, "was for you to fight for us, for this family. But it feels like you've already made your choice." She closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Nick, I don't know what to do. I don't even know who I am anymore." Her vulnerability disarmed me, and for a moment, I softened. "Emily," I said quietly, "I love you. I've always loved you, but I can't keep doing this alone." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I know, and I'm sorry." Her apology felt like a farewell, and in my heart, I knew our marriage was over. But the reality of it was too much to process. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think we need to separate," she said, her words like a dagger to my chest. "At least for a while. For the boys' sake, we'll keep things civil, but I think it's time." Time. The word echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of all we had lost. Later that night, as I lay awake in the dark, I thought about the life we had built together, the dreams we once shared, the love that had burned so brightly in the beginning. And though it was fading now, I resolved to hold onto the memories, for the sake of my boys, and for the man I once was. The day Emily and I decided to separate was the beginning of a new chapter, one I never wanted to write but knew was inevitable. We sat the boys down together, determined to be honest without burdening them with details they didn't need to know. Ethan looked at us with wary eyes, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Caleb sat beside him, his face pale and drawn. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Your mom and I have something to tell you," I began. "We've decided to live apart for a while." "What?" Ethan blurted, his voice cracking. "Why?" Emily placed a hand on his knee, her expression soft but firm. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Your dad and I love you both very much, but we think this is the best thing for our family right now." "But why can't you just fix it?" Caleb asked, his voice small. "You always tell us to say sorry and make up when we fight." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are harder to fix, Caleb. But this doesn't change how much we love you." Ethan's eyes brimmed with tears, and he looked between us, searching for answers. "Does this mean you're getting a divorce?" Emily hesitated, and I stepped in. "We don't know yet," I said honestly. "Right now, we just need some time to figure things out. But no matter what happens, we'll always be your parents. That will never change." Caleb climbed into my lap, clutching my shirt. "I don't want you to go." "I'm not going anywhere," I assured him, holding him close. "I'll still see you every day. We're still a family, even if things look a little different." Ethan didn't say anything, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. He stood abruptly and walked to his room, closing the door behind him. I didn't follow him right away, knowing he needed space. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of logistical planning. Emily and I agreed that she would move out temporarily, renting a small apartment nearby so the boys could easily go back and forth. The arrangement was civil, but every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. One evening, after the boys were asleep, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table, going over the details of the separation agreement. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words. "Do you think this is really what's best?" I asked, breaking the silence. She looked up from the paperwork, her eyes tired. "I don't know, Nick, but we've tried everything else." "Have we?" I countered. "Or have you already given up?" Her expression hardened. "I'm not the only one who's at fault here. You've made mistakes too." "I know I have," I admitted, "but I've owned up to them. I fought for this marriage, for you, for our family. Can you honestly say the same?" She looked away, her silence speaking volumes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." For the first time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. As much as I wanted to hold on to her, I realized that I couldn't save a marriage by myself. Letting go wasn't about giving up. It was about accepting the truth, no matter how painful it was. On the day Emily moved out, the boys helped her pack, their mood somber but cooperative. When the last box was loaded into her car, she hugged them tightly, promising to see them the next day. As she turned to me, there was a moment of hesitation. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Watching her drive away was like closing a door on a chapter of my life, one filled with love, heartbreak, and countless memories. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy became my sanctuary, helping me unpack years of pain and resentment. My therapist, a patient and insightful woman named Dr. Carter, helped me understand that my worth wasn't tied to Emily's choices. "Nick," she said during one session, "you've spent so much of your life trying to prove you're good enough. To your father, to Emily, even to yourself. But the truth is, you've always been enough. You just need to believe it." Her words stayed with me, a beacon of hope on the darkest days. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. I found joy in the little things. Playing catch with Ethan, reading bedtime stories to Caleb, cooking meals that filled our home with warmth. Emily and I maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of the boys. There were moments of tension, of course, but we both prioritized their well-being above all else. Over time, the bitterness faded, replaced by a mutual respect for the roles we played in each other's lives. One evening, as I was tucking Caleb into bed, he looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Dad, Do you still love Mom? The question caught me off guard. I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. I'll always care about your mom, I said. She's a big part of my life, and she gave me the two best gifts in the world. You and Ethan. But sometimes, love changes, and that's okay. He seemed to mull this over before nodding. I love you both, he said simply. I know, buddy, I said, kissing his forehead. And we love you. The holidays that year were bittersweet. Emily and I celebrated separately with the boys, but we made sure they felt surrounded by love. As I watched them open their gifts, their laughter filling the room, I realized that while our family had changed, it wasn't broken. Life was different now, but it was still filled with moments of joy, hope, and growth. And in those moments, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years.